What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to Hoshimi Miyabi's animated short, The Path to Becoming a Hero. I am very excited for this. This is the first real animated short we've gotten for Zenless Zero, so I'm really interested to see what this is like. It's a full 6 minutes long from the looks of it, so that's really exciting. I'm really hoping that this blows me away, as the demo for Harumasa set a pretty high bar already. But to not delay any further, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and let's get into this. Okay, paintings. Nice piano. Oh, is that her mother?
When I grow up, I want to be a hero, just like the heads of our family.
Hell yeah.
Oh? Does my little Miyabi know what it really means to be a hero?
To destroy all the bad guys.
Aww! That is such a cute voice.
Heroes aren't born to destroy, Miyabi. They're born to protect.
Yeah?
But all Mommy really wants is for you to grow up safe and sound. Because the path to becoming a hero often comes with losses that can't be undone.
Yep, yeah. Foreboding. Oh, going back to the very beginning. Oh. Baby.
So small, yet she chose a sword. Exactly what I'd expect from our most promising
sword's
man.
power rivals the Void Hunters. It's the Hoshimi clan's biggest secret.
Uh-oh.
My Miyabi
Why is the baby
doesn't
near
need
the sword?
demon sword. I just want her to live an ordinary, happy life.
Very early on trained. Broke the sword?
Mommy, it's time for training.
Today's training is eating all the veggies on your plate. And you have to get a full 8 hours of sleep for the training to count. You've forgotten your aunts and uncles' names again, haven't you? Then today's training is memorizing all of our family members' names.
So that's where her style of calling everything training comes from.
Miyabi, you can wear this dress when you're as tall as Mommy. In a few years, we'll travel together.
Wow, even
all
learned
across
to ride a
Eridu.
horse. Anyways, this is all gonna go to shit.
You're good at everything you try. You just need to be a little more patient, that's all.
Yeah, this is not gonna end well. This is set up for a gut punch, I can tell.
Today's afternoon snack is your favorite, melon. I can't wait
Way
to
that
see what you'll be
broke
like when you
open
grow up,
was
Miyabi.
concerning.
Miyabi, listen to me and close your eyes. Mommy will always be with you.
I don't think so. When the eye does close. Wow, they're just letting it be sound. Oh?
This is the only way.
Ugh. Giving her the sword in her last moments. Wait, was that Eco Corruption? Oh, fuck
Miyabi. Listen to Mommy and close your eyes. This is
Oh,
our last training.
good.
Miyabi, don't be sad.
Yeah, okay, it's growing.
Don't be afraid.
Oh, the cereal's on the blade.
On.
Oh!
Always.
Oh, fuck. Holy shit. And now, modern Miyabi.
Whoa! There were so many ethereals, and you...
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I still want to know what the fuck that thing is. Is that a manifestation of the demon sword or something?
When I grow up, I'm gonna become a hero,
Ooh.
just like you!
Yeah, that'd stop her. Did she say anything? No. Fuck. Okay. Wow, they're just letting the song play out. At least a little bit. Okay, that was really solid. It wasn't anything like groundbreaking. It was pretty straightforward and pretty clear where it was going from the beginning, but that does not necessarily take away from the quality of it. This definitely gives a lot more extra detail of what Miyabi's upbringing was like and essentially what her life was like leading up to her taking on the sword and becoming a Void Hunter eventually. And what effectively this entire animated short is about is Miyabi's relationship to her mother. So he starts here opening on these various paintings, seemingly of scenarios of battle and warfare, all of which I'm guessing might be paintings portraying ancestors of Miyabi's line, given that though it's harder to tell on some of these, it looks like there's at least one person in each of them that has something resembling ears on their head, like the big box ears. So I could see that being what these are depicting various ancestors that were heroes and warriors, hence why the subject of becoming a hero comes up here. And you know, we have the two of them walking here, Miyabi and her mom, and then they just sort of stop for a moment, and Miyabi sort of seriously looking forward, which is sort of adorable on the kid, especially with the voice they have. The voice is adorable here. She says rather resolutely, "When I grow up, I want to be a hero just like the heads of our family." Which, if all the paintings are of former heads or heroes from the family, that would make sense for her to bring it up right now. And then we cut to the mother, who, looking down at her daughter, goes, "Oh, does my little Miyabi know what it really means to be a hero?" Immediately, it is not a question of whether or not she will let her be a hero, or whether or not she thinks that's a good or bad idea, but rather a question of, does she understand what it means to be a hero? Does she have the mentality of a hero? Or will she need to be guided to understand what it truly means? And immediately, Miyabi says it's to destroy all bad guys. Very much the kind of thing a kid would say, not really understanding the full nuance of what it means to protect people and what makes a hero a hero. What initially here she is aspiring towards is how cool and powerful all of the heroes of her family are and how easily they can beat all the bad people. And this sort of catches her mom off guard for a moment, but she recovers pretty quickly, just sort of laughing it off as she goes to pat Miyabi's head and says, "Heroes aren't born to destroy, Miyabi. That is not the purpose of a hero. Perhaps it's the purpose of a warrior, but heroes and warriors are not the same thing. They're born to protect. Heroes are born to protect. The goal of a hero is to protect those they care about and those who need to be saved. That might involve beating the bad guys, if necessary, but that is not the reason they do it. An important lesson to instill in a child who is aspiring to do great things. But all mommy really wants is for you to grow up safe and sound. It's all really a parent could want, is to make sure that their child is safe. Which, of course, to an extent could be considered true because Miyabi is one of the most powerful people we've met so far. But also inevitably, by being one of the most powerful, she is the person in the most danger a lot of the time. So in a way, that's a hope and wish of her mother that she can't achieve. And the reason she says for that, hoping that she'll grow up safe and sound, is because the path to become a hero often comes with losses that can't be undone. And it's here where really I 100% knew that where we were going to end this animated short was with the death of her mother. But then we move through the light, entering the next scene, as we pull back even further to when just a newborn Miyabi was crawling around selecting toys. We see just a variety of toys laid out on the ground, but of all the various toys here, the one she goes for is the little toy sword. Something that on its own is relatively innocuous, but we then shift perspectives to reveal that actually, whether or not this was an explicit ritual of some kind, or just the family observing Miyabi, they clearly are all impressed that she chose the sword. It holds a meaning for them, that despite the fact that she is so small and still a baby, she chose the sword. Now, of course, as I said, this is pretty innocuous on the base level of picking up a toy that is a toy sword, but on a narrative and thematic level for the meta context, as well as a cultural significance level for them, it holds other meanings, given that they use the exact wordage that despite the fact that she is so small, she chose the sword. She chose to take up the blade no matter how young and small she was, implying that this is almost a destined fate for her to take up the blade. There is some layered voices as we shift to the perspective of, I would assume, her parents. It lines up to be her mother. They share the pin and stuff. So I'm pretty confident that's the mother, and I would assume that that is the father next to her. But what I find interesting is their eyes are indistinct, covered up by their hair and just some shadow over their eyes. And they do not seem happy about this compared to everyone else, which, given the previous line from her mom saying that she grows up safe and sound, I imagine that seeing their daughter pick up the sword and seeing everyone around them impressed and clearly believing that that means that they will be a great warrior and hero, that puts fear in their hearts that their daughter will be at risk, that she will be going into battle someday, and it makes them fear for the life of their daughter. That is my guess to what this reaction is meant to be. But as we get this visual, there's the layering lines, one of which saying, if she earns Talus's recognition. Perhaps Talus is the little spirit thing? I'm not entirely sure, though. That might be another cultural figure within their family or group or whatever this is. But another voice is also layered, saying exactly what I'd expect from our most promising heir. So she already was promising for whatever reason. Perhaps her parents already are of some stature within the clan or whatever. We continue to have the layered voices. One saying her future will be limitless, speaking to her eventual power and the belief of her clan in that. But then the next voice speaks of something that we shift to a relevant visual of in a moment, saying, I heard that sword's power rivals the Void Hunters. We are no longer talking about Miyabi, but rather the sword. As we change shots to Miyabi, still a baby, approaching this clearly important sword as it is tied up ceremonially, and as she approaches it, the voice from before mentioning the sword continues, saying it's the Hoshimi clan's big secret. A sword that matches the power of the Void Hunters. A secret of her clan. And just as she was drawn to the toy sword, she finds herself drawn to it. Which, first off, I'd just like to acknowledge, who lets their child get this close to a cursed sword or whatever? Evidently, they're not that bad parents, as though they let their child near a legendary, powerful sword. They evidently didn't leave her alone there, as before she can reach out to the blade, her mother is there saying, my Miyabi doesn't need the demon sword, showing that it clearly has some power within it, that I think we get a glimpse of later in this, showing that perhaps it isn't necessarily just a weapon of power, but also of bloodlust and corruption, potentially. Or at the very least, it holds some demonic power within it. And then we cut to a different shot where it's just Miyabi and her mother playing effectively, as the mother essentially repeats, I just want her to live an ordinary, happy life. Effectively retorting all of the hopes and anticipations of the rest of the clan, saying how impressive she'll be and how powerful she'll become. She doesn't want her daughter to be some big impressive hero who saves the world, putting herself at risk. She just wants her daughter to be safe. She offers her just the toy sword again. They're clearly happy. And then we see still very young, like probably barely older than they were when we were first seeing them crawl around, but obviously steady on their feet to a degree now. We see they're already training with that toy sword. Falls over, breaks it. Now, what I'm curious about is, I can't decide if the broken sword is meant to imply that she broke it by accident or by sheer force. Because if they're going with the angle of her being a true prodigy who is unrivaled in potential and power, it would make sense that she would be able to, even this young, break her play sword without much remarkable effort. But it is also equally possible that that isn't what specifically they're trying to portray, and rather it's just she broke it because she was a careless kid who isn't really dutifully training necessarily. Where then I feel like there is also the third option, which is she was dutifully training despite how young she was, and she just used the sword so much that it eventually broke. But I feel like one of the first two is more realistic based on how they portray her in these early moments. I'm actually sort of leaning towards the one of her potential and power being what broke it, given that she doesn't seem upset that it's broken, despite it clearly being one of her favorite early toys, and she doesn't seem particularly motivated currently, which implies that she just sort of did it accidentally without much concern for the blade, and now has moved on to just play elsewhere regardless of how much power she exerted on the blade before. We see her just chasing a little butterfly casually, and now we actually do see some of that motivation I was curious about as she gets into training gear and tells her mom it's time for training. We see this wall of a variety of weapons. Interestingly enough, a lot of them are fairly modern in their designs. This looks like a full-ass gun. Meanwhile, most of these are various swords and axes, a few pole arms mixed in there, and then there's the one big hammer. But interestingly enough, we see here that though the mother is concerned for the safety of her daughter and wants to make sure that she is safe and grows up healthy, she also isn't against Miyabi making use of her talents and potential. She doesn't want to stifle Miyabi, she just is fearful of what will come of her if she goes down this path. As we have the mother, rather than saying, no training today, you don't need to train, you're just a child, she says, today's training is eating all the veggies on your plate. And this begins a little repetitive cycle here in this next bit, where she frames everything she wants Miyabi to do as training, which, as I pointed out in the reaction itself, very obviously makes sense to be the origin of why Miyabi refers to doing pretty much anything as training, as even just the simplest of tasks that she may not want to do necessarily, her mother referred to as a form of training to incentivize her to do it. Which is actually very solid parenting, I'd say. She's looking at what motivates her child and tries to interpret and redirect that motivation towards positive things. But even if what she is saying is directed toward more mundane things, we also see her helping Miyabi train with weaponry. As she reaches out for one of the blades, and surprised, worried almost, her mother grabs a different weapon and puts it into Miyabi's hand, being the giant hammer. Now, I find that interesting because I would not necessarily consider this small sword to be more dangerous than this giant hammer that the bludgeoning part of is bigger than her entire body. Neither are safe for a child to wield, but I don't think that unless the sword she was reaching for is the demon sword or some other magically powerful sword, I don't see why this choice of weapon would be any better. So it might be the demon sword, but it looked different. I'm not entirely sure on that. But regardless, we see her guiding her in how to use the giant hammer. We don't see Miyabi actually using it, but clearly she handed the hammer and is now discussing how to use it or something along those lines. As in voiceover, she continues what she was saying before about eating the veggies as training, saying, and you have to get a full 8 hours of sleep for the training to count. Instilling this idea that even if you do all your training correctly, eat your veggies, you still have to sleep a full night's rest or else it won't count. Once again, another version of using her motivation to instill these good practices. We then return here, but there are less weapons. Notably, it's not just the hammer that's gone, there's multiple weapons that are gone. But she reaches out for the same blade, and once again, her mother puts a different weapon in her hand. Perhaps what it is isn't that the specific weapon is more dangerous, but rather that she is willing to help her daughter become a hero and improve her martial prowess, but she is fearful of what will happen if she learns how to use swords specifically, as that would lead her down the path of picking up the demon blade someday. I could see that. I could see that as the motivation of, in her mind, saying to herself that she is willing to train her daughter in any kind of weapon and fighting style other than the sword, as only the sword would lead her to picking up the family blade. But as, once again, we repeat this handing of a non-sword weapon, we have the next instance of training as her mother says, "You've forgotten your aunts and uncles' names again, haven't you?" We see here that the weapon she was given this time is a polearm. We then, before she's even done talking in the voiceover, get the next weapon. She's given an axe. The wall has run out of a lot of weapon options. At this point, there's just another axe, the gun, and then 2 swords, it would seem. But continuing from her previous statement, her mother says that today's training is memorizing all our family members' names. The second repetition of using the concept of training to help her to remember things and to do things that are good for her and that kind of thing. We get this fun little moment where her mother just repositions her dress to put her hands on her lap, and Miyabi very cutely mimics her action. Between that and this line, it's heavily implied that Miyabi is interested in having a dress like that or something. And in effectively response to that, her mother says that she can wear this dress when you're as tall as mommy. When you grow up, you can wear a dress like this. Seemingly, her mother is teaching her to play an instrument. I forget what this instrument is called, but I recognize it. The name is escaping me right now. Clearly, we're just shifting through various talents and skills that her mother is teaching her, which, if my interpretation about why she doesn't want her to use the sword is correct, it would make sense, because she's basically just pointing her daughter in every possible direction for any possible life path other than the swordswoman. But as we see her learning how to ride a horse, we get the next thing her mother says, being, "In a few years, we'll travel together all across Eridu," which, first off, acknowledges, if it wasn't obvious prior to now, that this is prior to the fall of the old capital, which is a bit foreboding, and in contrast with how nice the current shot is. They're riding horses along the street, there are flowers in bloom, there's a rainbow, there's a plane in the sky flying by, everything's just great. Clear skies. We see Miyabi learning archery, once again another skill, but not that of the sword. Calligraphy, or just writing. Her mother says that Miyabi is good at everything she tries. She has offered her daughter countless possibilities, and she has been amazing at all of them. But she just needs to be a little more patient, implying that she's eager to do something, to be something, potentially. You get this brief, nice shot of clearly winter or something along those lines. Them inside, huddled near, I would imagine, some kind of lamp or something, huddled up together with a blanket over them for warmth. This shot, actually, having gone back to it, very much makes me think that my idea of her mother keeping her away from anything that resembles a sword, a blade, as possible. As we see here, Miyabi rather expertly beginning to peel an apple with a knife. As her mother says, today's afternoon snack is your favorite, melon, distinctly not the apple she's peeling. As we see her hand come in and take the knife from Miyabi, not wanting her to have a blade, and just sort of nervously and politely telling her don't use knives. But what interests me with the mention of melon and the continued concern of her daughter using a blade is this very brief shot of a melon hitting the ground, impacting, cracking open, and bursting open in a rather violent manner. It's a very brief shot that I don't necessarily know how it connects, but it definitely feels more foreboding than anything. But then we have the two of them just at night watching a fireworks display, as she tells Miyabi, "I can't wait to see what you'll be like when you grow up, Miyabi," which, as we know, she will unfortunately not ever be able to, just adding a layer of tragedy to it all. Definitely a death flag. Miyabi lies down on her mother's lap and begins to sleep, and then she says something that we will hear repeated in not too long. She tells Miyabi, "Listen to me and close your eyes. Mommy will always be with you," trying to instill that comfort of family and togetherness, regardless of what the future holds. And this line comes as Miyabi's eyes close slowly, looking out at the cityscape. And as she does, the lights of the city go out, and it turns to red as fire erupts within the city. We can hear the sound of people screaming in the background. Her eye lingers open for a time, not fully closing, almost opening more, but then fully closes. And we just stay with the screams for a while and the sound of fire. And when she opens her eyes again, she's seeing her own reflection in the demon blade. And as her mother lowers it, we see exhausted, bruised, blood on her face, and the beginnings of the ether corruption growing on her face as well, surrounded by the fires burning around them. As, despite all of her efforts to keep her daughter away from becoming a legendary swordswoman and keep her safe, despite that, in this final moment where she realizes that she is doomed to become ethereal or be killed before that, she recognizes that this is the only way. Surrounded by ethereals, turning into one herself, the only way for her daughter to survive is if she finally allows her daughter to pick up the sword she's been drawn to for so long. Despite all her hopes for her daughter's safe future, she accepts the future risk to her daughter in order to save her now. And we see here as everything is burning around them, she takes Miyabi's hand, lifting the sword up to her. We see some scrapes and bruises as well as more ether corruption on her arm as she places the hilt of the sword in Miyabi's tiny hand. She's still just a child at this point. I would not be surprised if this moment, where everything is burning and ethereals are everywhere, is the fall of the old capital. Wide-eyed and beginning to cry, Miyabi doesn't say anything at first, and as one of her tears hits the blade, held in her hand, it begins to glow with a blue light. As the music comes in, and the blue light erupts into a blue flame, casting these distinct bluish shadows around the two of them, in contrast with all the fire around them. Barely holding on, her vision and grip shaky, her mother makes sure she has both hands on the blade, holding it forward towards her. She reaches up and pats her daughter's head one last time, eyes closed, trying to give a final comfort, smiling as we see the ether corruption has grown worse. And once again, trying to reassure her daughter, says, "Miyabi, listen to mommy and close your eyes," repeating the lines we heard not too long ago, making us understand where this is going. And we shift to Miyabi's perspective to look at her mother. This is our last training, a final training from her mother, trying to frame it in a way that makes it not as painful, by putting it in a framework that is familiar. This is just training. It may be the last training, but it is training. And to that, Miyabi shakes her head and says no. She can understand at least somewhat what she's meaning by this. But continuing to reassure her, her mother says, "Don't be sad, don't be afraid." And as she says this, she helps Miyabi to lift the blade up towards her. And as she does, we see in the reflection the approaching ethereals. They don't have time for any more discussion. As she says, "Live on," and forces Miyabi to pull the blade into her, stabbing her own mother through the chest, killing her before she can become an ethereal. And we pull out to see that on her mother's back, the corruption was even worse. The music has risen up to be far more in our face, far more dramatic, as we just hold on this moment. With the last of her strength, her mother reaches up, still not quite gone, to touch her cheek and tell her that she loves her, always, wiping away her tears. But it's also, while she is saying this, that we hear this other voice, almost in the back of our heads, echoing, which I believe to be the voice within the sword, whatever the demon within it may be. We unfortunately don't have subtitles for it, but the first bit is saying something about being free. Perhaps finally the demon with the blade can be free. Oh, actually, I think the line might be "kill and be free." I think that might be it. I couldn't quite tell though. But regardless of what that first line fully was, it then says "kill" much more intensely and audibly as the sword begins to glow. And we see, as it repeats this, Miyabi be overtaken by this force, which takes the form visually of this far messier style which is almost like paint or chalk or graphite or something. And it shifts into blacks and reds instead of grays, as we see the silhouette of Miyabi now turned into a killing machine, blade in hand, rushing forward. We see her cut down the first ethereal. She tears through all of the ones in the area as she just screams. And we have this visual here that looks somewhere between Tales and Fire. There's the sound of the fire building again here, which makes me think this looks like fire, but it also very clearly evokes Tales. It's hard to make out exactly how many Tales are here, but regardless of how many there are specifically, this absolutely is evoking the concept that she has Kitsune connections, at least aesthetically. It very well might actually be more literally so. Perhaps the demon in the blade is some kind of nine-tailed fox type figure or something. This could just be Naruto. All that we can really hear is the song, the fire, and her screams of despair. As it just becomes nothing, there's the slashing of a blade, and then we see modern Miyabi sheathing her sword. We have her little spirit thing here, which I still don't know what it is. If we actually have lore on it, I'd love to find out, but as far as I know, we don't understand what it is, and I assume we'd find out once she releases. But regardless, we are then here with her in modern day, having clearly just defeated several ethereals as well at this moment. But rather than being this grief-filled rage that it was after the death of her mother, as an adult, she's wiped out these ethereals, saving a mother and a daughter. And the child is just amazed, saying, whoa, there were so many ethereals. And Yu doesn't finish her statement, but clearly is just amazed by the power of Miyabi. The mother then speaks up saying, thank you so much. And she just nods and walks away. But then the child calls out, something that should remind her of herself as a child, saying, when I grow up, I'm going to become a hero just like you, which I would imagine gives conflicted feelings for Miyabi. We see that this stops her in her tracks and forces her to turn, but then we don't see her eyes after the initial turn. We just see her mouth in a slight frown, and at one moment almost speak, but no. I imagine that it's very conflicting to hear that, as on one hand, it means that, at least in the eyes of that child, she has become a hero. She is someone who saves people. She is someone who protects others. Not just someone who beats the bad guys, but protects those who need to be protected. And if that is the case, she is living up to her mother's belief of what a hero is. But on the other hand, I imagine that it also brings up some negative memories of where this path has led her. I imagine she might look at this mother and daughter and hear this daughter say words that she herself once spoke, and fear that if this child attempts to follow that path, will it lead her to losing her mother as well? So as I said, I imagine that's rather conflicting in her mind, leading to why she just sits here for a moment considering saying something but never does. She just walks back off, and we fade to the logo, and the song just continues for a few more seconds to just stew in all of the emotion. And that is the entire animated short. It is really solid. Very quickly in it, I was able to understand where things were leading, but that does not take away from how well it was done. Easily my favorite part of all of this is this period where it's this chaotic, messy style. As is the case for pretty much any of these, I love when they go beyond the normal art style. But with that, I feel like I've covered this pretty well, so I'll leave it there. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, leave a comment on your thoughts, and I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye!